Here, yeah.
Okay, this is Rock Robbins, your technical host for the evening. We'll be getting started shortly.
You're such a dork.
It's great to see everyone today.
I like how you covered up the mirror with the pillows.
Yeah, well, otherwise you see the back of my head, which is very exciting, but I don't want to distract people with my gigantic cranium.
I just love that you saw that and like you thought about it.
I know.
And look, aren't those awesome pillows? Don't people appreciate that?
I'm like, could you at least put them evenly? And there's also like all the stuff I was pulling out from under your bathroom
Okay,
sink.
I'll work on that. I'll
It's
clean up.
in the
I'll clean
background.
up Studio 21
It
over
just
here.
it kind of looks like a bed with a bed frame and some pillows on it. Like you wouldn't
It
even know.
does. It does, actually. You're right.
I'm a guy. I thought pillows. You guys would like pillows.
Wouldn't have noticed a thing, Rock, if Stacey hadn't pointed it out.
Right. I mean,
And
look
now
at this. We got this great. Look at this great photo, and there's the boys over here.
Well, I keep thinking I've got like these freckles on my face, and I'm like, oh no, that's like food on my screen. I'm just like clearing it off right now.
Okay,
It's a hot mess moment over here. Like
Stacy,
hot mess
can
meets I Love
you
Lucy.
click the intensity of the light, like down one? I want to see how it does it. You're a little slightly overblown.
Oh wow. That
Oh
was
wait,
Did you just change the color?
I did.
Now, now press the minus or whatever the down.
Okay, well, what color do you like?
I liked the kind of one I had before.
The warm one, that one?
Yeah, the
Okay.
warm.
All right.
Okay, and can you turn it down one more time? As far as the
No,
brightness,
I
not the color.
can't
Okay,
even see me. Okay.
there you go.
I
And can
feel
you
like I'm
put your right arm up again and get that little bit that now everyone saw was I
like
feel much better now.
like, what is he talking about?
No, you're good.
Yeah.
Hey, Phil,
You
everybody.
guys are having way too much fun for a
We
pre-game.
Yeah, well, and you know what? I feel like my ears are so tired. It's the 1980s earrings are back, where it's like heavy, big silver earrings for
Okay, I
like,
didn't know. Thanks for the update.
No, I don't
I
think they're
didn't
real. I
know.
think that's an Instagram filter.
Big, heavy earrings.
Yeah, and I'm like, oh my God, I feel like I did when I was in high school in the 80s. It's like I used to steal my mom's big earrings, and then I remember the day that we couldn't find one of the earrings. I came home from school. She's like, "Where's my other earring?" I'm like, "What do you mean? I had run over it with the car when I left. It was one of those clip-ons, and it had fallen out, and it was like mother of pearl. It was really big and heavy with real sterling silver, and the little clip. Yeah, I ran over it. It was destroyed. Like, sorry." Yeah, that's what you get when you have three daughters who are digging into your closet, your makeup, your jewelry, everything.
Okay, one more technical thing. Phil, can you say a few things and pull your
Yep.
screen so that your head is a little higher on the
Yeah.
screen?
Can you be closer, Phil? Because
I
I feel
kind
like,
of can't with the setup I have.
oh, that's good. No, that's good now. I
Yeah,
see. It's fine.
it's
Okay.
about as good as I can do. I don't have any cool pillows like you, Rock, but I
Oh
could
my
get
God.
some. I
I
could
No.
get
know.
Phil,
some.
were you
Yeah.
listening?
No,
Yeah,
yeah, I heard you
he was
guys.
listening. No.
That's
Okay,
what
I
I
was gonna
heard.
say that's way no way.
I
Like,
love
Yeah,
it. I love it.
it's picking up that from the universe.
yeah.
More pillows. That's what this needs is more
The
pillows.
world needs more
I
pillows
put
to
my
throw.
fuzzy pillow behind me. It's like it's so cozy. I
It's
love it.
too
It's
soft. It's
I
huge.
unnatural.
literally have my whole setup propped up on pillows in front of me with pillows behind me. So
Oh my gosh, you have all these freckles, Jess. What is all over my computer?
Oh, that
uh,
must be food on your screen.
You were listening. You little eavesdropper.
Okay, I'm gonna go back to the background and we're
Okay.
live.
Thank you,
All
Mr. Rock.
right.
Appreciate your tech support. Come back on at the end and say adieu with all of us.
I like when Rock just emerges at random times throughout our chats, just like appears and comes
Yes,
in. So
there's his face.
I'm looking forward to that. Oh, there we go.
What,
Like
did he do
mission
it?
control.
Did he do it?
Yeah,
I
he looks
missed
like
it.
he's launching a space shuttle or something.
You know, it's funny.
Got that.
Sometimes he puts himself on the Starship Enterprise.
I think we just had like a big shuttle launch either today or yesterday. I had made a note to look for it because it is so incredible when you see it in the sky, but I missed it and I don't even know what happened. But
Hmm. I didn't see that. Was that here in California? You mean in
I
Florida?
think so. I think so, but I'm not positive.
Hmm. Okay, Phil, look at your phone real quick. Can you look at your phone? I'm texting.
Sure.
Um, um, okay, there you go.
All right, that we've begun.
Dun, 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 dun. Bum, ba, ba, da, ba, bum. Dun, 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 dun. What is that? Is that Star Wars? That's Superman. All right, whatever. It's one of those. You wouldn't have known, Jess? Not your generation.
Superman for those playing at home.
Yeah, that would be a fun game. We did that. We did that at one of the retreats one of my Italian retreats where it was the one that was Alicia was at too, where we did a whole bunch of like, what are they called when you do songs that are from like your era?
Like a theme song
Theme
or like
songs,
a
yeah.
soundtrack or something. Yeah.
Yeah, it was like the theme songs to shows or commercials or Schoolhouse Rock or fun things like that. All right. All right, guys. Kick it off,
That,
Phil.
yeah. Welcome. 2025. We did it. We made it. I think we all probably we had our holiday fun. If you're anything like me, I always end off the year by getting sick after all the like outings and holidays and parties and stuff. So I got my 3 or 4 days on the couch and then here we are. Welcome to 2025. Great to have you with us. It's going to be a good year. We're launching our online gatherings for the year where we gather like this once a month and talk about different topics in spirituality. And we'll tell you a little bit more about that. And then we're going to dive right into this path of deconstructing Christianity or a path of deconstructing like the faith maybe that you grew up in and grew up with. Um, and we're excited to share with you and connect with you. But just briefly, Rock, maybe you'll put it up on the screen, but we are Common Ground. And throughout the year, we do a variety of online gatherings like this. We do in-person gatherings, which we have one going on this month. And we do one-on-one spiritual direction as well. So we always want to encourage you, take a quick look at the website. There's some great info about who we are and how you can get involved. And if you want to connect with us, please, through the contact form on the website, reach out to us. We'd love to tell you about some of the things coming up, and we hope to get the chance to meet you, whether online, based on where you live, or in person sometime this year. So, yay.
Good job.
Stace, you want to add anything in?
Yeah, yes. Yeah, thank you, Phil. Happy New Year to everybody. And
Yeah.
what we're excited about, Common Ground has taken a lot of different shapes and forms over the years. And, it's gone through different iterations, whether we offered free counseling to couples that were in like tough places in their marriage. That's how we started out Common Ground. And then we went to, spiritually anxious women. I was coaching spiritually anxious women who were just going through a lot of stuff. And then we worked with the food insecure and doing a lot of events for many years, raising thousands and thousands of dollars for local and global organizations to feed people. And then we shifted to kind of this place where we were in general talking about, spirituality and wanting to be a place for people who were outside of the church. But that kind of was very broad. And just recently we've narrowed ourselves down to a place that feels really, really exciting. And that is talking about deconstructing Christianity, which we're going to talk about tonight in definitions and our experiences. What does it mean? Like, what are the stages of it? We're going to talk about these different things, but what I want to let us know as the founder of Common Ground and as the really we're all bringing the heart of Common Ground on our board, and we're hearing the heart of people in the church who have questions but really not a place to ask them. And we're really desiring to be that home base where you can come with your I don't know-ness, your questions, your thoughtful considerations, your reevaluations, your disillusionments, and to know that you're safe, you're loved, you're accepted, and no one's going to try to fix you, save you, or change you, but we're going to be with you in the process and be a witness and a support and a fellow traveler on the journey of understanding our spirituality and learning to live in what is meaningful to us. So thank you for joining us tonight. We welcome those of you who would call yourself in the category of deconstructing Christianity, and we're glad that all of you are here.
Well, I thought it might be good for us to start off with each of us maybe attempting to try to define what does that mean to deconstruct your faith or deconstruct your Christianity. Obviously, like on one hand, we know, it's like a construction word. We kind of know the word, but I'd love for each of us just to take a shot at like, what does it mean? Like, how would you define this thing? One of you guys want to take a swing at it?
Go for it, Jess.
Yeah, I mean, for me and my life, the way that I see it is because we're not really just talking about leaving, Christianity necessarily. And for some of us in that, like this space, that is what it ends up looking like. But like the term deconstructing is like very different than like changing religions or leaving or whatever. And so I think that because for a lot of people, and I know for me, it wasn't as simple as like exiting my faith. Like I had grown up in it, and there was so much that I really felt tied to, like in my heart. Yeah, obviously, like fear-based, and we'll get into all of that. But I think the idea of deconstructing Christianity is really about like taking it as a whole and kind of breaking it into parts almost, and like seeing what fits and what doesn't. And I did that intuitively, for years anyways. I just was told like I wasn't allowed. You can't
Hmm.
cherry pick. You can't pick and choose, like you
It's
have to
all or
accept
nothing.
always, always. And I
Huh.
think deconstructing it is really looking at like, is there anything that works here, or like what is still speaking to me? What like has my heart about this religion that like I've grown up in? Like what makes sense? What it's like parceling out the
Hmm.
truth from the not truth, or if you can't even get there, then just like the questions and the resonances and what does not resonate, and um kind of making it make sense if you arrive at a place where it does. And a lot of people do actually, like arrive at a place where things still make sense to them. But it's being able to just like deconstruct what you've known and seeing what's left over, if there is anything left over, and reconstructing, for your journey going forward.
Good. That's good,
Yeah.
Jess. Yeah, and I would say, it makes me think of chefs. One of my most joyful and favorite chefs is Massimo Bottura, and he is in Modena in Italy. And he is somebody who took the foods that he was raised with in Italy, and he took them apart of the whole, like tortellini in brodo, tortellini in broth, the way it was traditionally done by his grandmother, let's say, and his great grandmother, making the
Hmm.
tortellini and all of this. And it was done a certain way. And what he did was he looked at what the elements were. What are those individual elements that make up the whole? And how can I take, like Jess said, the best parts of those, or the parts that are meaningful to me or speak to me? How do I assemble this dish that is delicious and yet uniquely expressed through me? And while I take these elements that are of the tradition that I was raised in. And so he would do these really unique things where he would take the tortellini and he would stack them along the edge of and the broth would just be in there, but the tortellini would be standing like they were lining up in a pool to go jumping in. So that's what I think of. I think of chefs when they take this whole recipe and they break it down into the parts. And yeah, and it's kind of like, oh, what is confusing to me is one of the things that I think of in deconstructing, like asking those questions. What's confusing to me? What's meaningful to me? What is without conflict? What's, inspiring? It's just all of these things. So for me, deconstructing is like what Jess said, it's taking the whole, breaking it down into the parts, and then going through an evaluation process. And
Mm.
like you said, Jess, we'll talk about the way that that was experienced by people around us when we went through that. But Phil, what do you think? What is deconstructing to you?
Yeah, I mean, I'm finding it interesting that both of you in different ways, but you've talked about like instead of looking at the whole thing, like kind of looking at all the parts, almost like more individually. I think that's interesting. I don't know, in my mind, it's like it goes to like, I don't know, a construction site, like building a tall tower or something. Like you've spent all these years building this thing. You you just invested so much building this thing, and it's like this beautiful skyscraper, and then I don't know, for like maybe no good reason, or maybe there is a good reason, I don't know, you like hire a crew of people that come in and start to like tear it down, like start taking the pieces away and like removing this building. Maybe like a good recent example is like we just did a little trip to Las Vegas, but like Las Vegas is funny. You got like the strip right there, and the land is so valuable that like every year, one of like the beloved old timey hotels gets just destroyed, every little part removed. And then, of course, they're doing that to like put an even bigger and shinier casino right there. I don't know. That's kind of like where my mind goes with the word deconstruction. It's like, yeah, you've built this thing up, and in a way, it's great. And then I don't know, maybe there's a need for to build something greater, but before you can do that, you have to take some stuff away. I don't know. That's kind of how my mind deals with it.
Yeah,
I like it. Like
I like that
food.
picture. It makes me think of
Yeah.
like when you're wanting to clean out your closet, and because you realize there are things in there that you keep just because they're familiar, but you don't really wear them. They don't even fit you anymore. They're out of style. They
Mm.
don't they don't work for you. They're not joyful to you, but they take up a lot of space. And it's sort of like this thing of taking all the things out of the closet and kind of looking at each one and going, what are you? What do I want? Do I want to wear you? Like, what's the meaning of this? And then you put back in your closet what is the very best thing. But there's just something about taking it all out first. So
Have you, I've kind of, we probably each heard people talk about this process. So at least in a few occasions, I've heard people kind of break it into maybe three periods. Like there's like the constructing and then the deconstructing. And then like Jess, you even mentioned, I guess there's like a reconstructing phase. Have you guys heard different words for, or like what do you think of as the phases of going through this process? Is it three things? Is it five things? I don't know. What words have you guys heard for someone who goes through this process? What do you think?
I mean, the words that really stand out to me the most are deconstructing and reconstructing.
Okay, yeah,
That's what
yeah.
I circles.
yeah.
I mean, of course, there's so much that goes into all of that. Like, I mean, those are like the overarching
Mm.
themes.
Like each phase might have like sub phases, or
Yes,
you're like,
I
I
mean,
don't
like
know, yeah.
there's grief, and like Stacey used the
Mm,
word disillusionment, and that is such a perfect word that really resonated with me. There's so many like feelings and emotions and stages, like it's a grieving, like the deconstructing is largely also a like a it's disorienting. It's
mm.
there's grief. There's
That's
so
another word I've heard, just like orientation, disorientation, and then reorientation. Like I think probably meaning pretty similar things, but I've heard people use those words too. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, and I think that we're not necessarily constructing in the beginning. I think that we're handed our faith is what I think is happening. I think that we're born into something of a belief system, usually, and then we are, we go, oh yes, and we just kind of take it in and we live as if it's true. And then we get to a point where like, wait a minute, that ends up disincluding some people who I love. Wait, let me look at like my faith again. Let me look at those beliefs again. Why do we believe that? Like we have different things that I think cause that, and we can talk about that. We can jump into that even
Yeah.
now. What is it that causes that?
I would love to jump into that. I'm
Do
so
it.
curious, like, because I don't know about you, but I certainly didn't see this coming for me. There was no like plan to go down this path. That even if you could have talked to 10 years ago me, I would say there was just no awareness of this path laying in front of me. So I am curious for each of us, like, how did you stumble into this? Like, where did this come from? Why even do this? I don't know. I'm curious, like, how you came to walk down this path of deconstructing your faith. Why did you do it? Why,
Yeah. Do we go in the order of who did it first? How do we go through this? I mean, I've
chronological.
yeah, I've been at this for a long time.
Hmm. Yeah, you're the pro here.
No, I mean, I don't mean that way. I just mean that I've got the battle scars. That's really
Hmm.
it. No, I think for me, as being a worship leader, a minister in the church, you get expected to do a lot of things that are within the culture of the church. And those things get kind of turned into the dogma of the religion. So it's like you have a mix of things of here's the religion of what we believe, here's the interpretation of the Bible, here's the way the church functions in the culture. And they're all kind of wrapped up in this. And this is what is godly. This is what God expects. This is what is good. This is what is true. This is what you have to do. And what happened for me, being in those situations, and I've always been a pioneer. Always been that aggravating person who raised my hand in the front row and said, wait a minute, can you explain? That doesn't make sense to me. And it's like, Stacy, can you give someone else a turn? And basically it was like, Stacy, could you not, be thinking? Could you not be thinking? And then you add being a woman in that position
Hmm.
and in a culture that, barely had caught up to the value of women being in that position to lead and to ask questions and all of those things. It just got very, there were things that didn't make sense. There were things that I found conflicting within the Bible and I didn't understand. And then I saw myself having to do a lot of mental gymnastics in order to be in compliance with the things that were expected of me. And, there's this point where I'm just not a let me just play along. There's a point where I just go, this doesn't make sense. And I have to say something, and who can I talk to? And then I would do that. I would reach out to pastors and colleagues and bring these things up. And then when you start seeing reactions of the way people respond to you when you're bringing these things up, now it's suddenly like, oh, where's your faith? What, like, are you doubting God? Should you be in leadership? Like, do you have some sin in your life? Like, instead of being honored for being a thoughtful person who has
Hmm.
questions, there was a lot of feeling like this is insubordination. This is revealing your weakness. This is revealing your lack. We might have to reevaluate you. And so what happens, it's almost like the ultimate of feeling gaslit. It's like I'm coming bringing issues, in a vulnerability and a real sincere, like, I want to understand this. Can we talk about it? And then having someone say, you have a problem for seeing it that way. And, being someone who was raised in situations that were very traumatic, and there was a lot of abuse in my life, that can be a very familiar territory to retract, to think it's me, that I'm having, not just that I'm having issues that I want to address and that I have a problem, but that I am a problem. And that's what would happen, is I would address things that felt like a problem or an issue or like a consideration, but it was turned on me like I was the problem. And that's very similar to what happens in abusive situations. So it touched something very similar in me, but because it was so important, because it's the God stuff, and because I'm leading people about things that are not just in the visible, but the invisible, of like heaven and hell and afterlife. And I just was like, I can't just not do something, and I can't just not say something. So, I mean,
Was there though a part of you that kind of wanted to just be quiet and go along and like keep working
sure.
and keep, like wasn't there some
Yeah.
temptation to be like, you know what, if I could just be quiet, everything will be okay,
Yeah. And I think there's such a part of me that, I'm a firstborn child. I'm the good girl, like I want to be the good girl. But then there's this thing inside of me that's like, hell no, I can't do this. I can't. I want to have all the rewards of people thinking well of me, but I just can't stay quiet because it didn't stay quiet inside of me. The questions didn't stay quiet inside of me. And I kept trying to make things that didn't make sense work. And I called them my mental gymnastics. Like I had to do a lot of mental gymnastics to make things make sense that didn't make sense. But it was starting to create some kind of, like, I don't want to say craziness in me, but it was creating chaos inside of me to try to live a double life. And being
Yeah.
raised again in a situation that had so much abuse and so many secrets, it really was a hand in glove situation to now be in that situation as an adult, where now I'm living in a church situation where I have to be the good
Yeah.
girl who doesn't tell the things that are going on in my heart and life. And I have to pretend that I'm not living in that, but it's living inside of me. It
Yeah, it's
was,
like the only thing harder than being fake with other people ultimately is like feeling fake to yourself.
yes.
Like that's not a fun spot to be in.
It wasn't. And now
I
you're
know. I
raising
wonder.
kids. I was raising, sorry, I'll just finish it this because there's, a million hours of
Yeah, there's so many
details in
layers.
this.
Yeah.
But I'll
The
just
kids
say
is scary. Yeah.
it starts being a real different conflict when you're raising children and you're going, okay, it's not just me. It's like sort of like if you go, oh, we're out of food, I'll eat ketchup packets, and I'll fast and make it through. But once you're dealing with kids, you're like, no, you're gonna hustle to make sure they have the food that they need. There's a different perspective once you have to pass on these philosophies, theologies, ideologies to
Yeah.
this child, and you go, am I burdening you, or am I blessing you with this teaching, with this thought? And I felt very, very protective of not wanting to burden my children with ideologies and theologies that were so burdensome to me.
Mm. So if we're zooming back a little bit to this like construction, deconstruction, reconstruction. So you're talking about this transition from construction, this thing you built and believed, to deconstruction. In that moment, I'm just curious, what were like some of the feelings? What are the feelings of that?
Geez, Phil, that's a great question. You're asking me that, or
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Like, what are those feelings?
Yeah, it feels really scary. It feels like I have to choose between risking me or risking everything that I've built to um, support me, to surround me, to identify me. It's like, it's all risk, no matter what I do. And it's like having to choose the greater risk. The greater risk became not being true to me. And it didn't just feel scary because it was my job, it was my living, it was my reputation, it was my passion, it was my mission. It was something that I'd already done that was affecting a lot of people. And it's like, if I'm going to change, do I have to go back and find all those people and go, wait a minute, I think I might have given you some misinformation. You know, it's like, it's a lot of cleanup on aisle everywhere when you're talking about existential beliefs that you're passing on to other people. It's a lot of responsibility. And not only that, I felt the existential worry and fear as I was in my process. Like, am I letting go of the safety net of salvation by questioning these things? Am I going to affect my eternal salvation damnation? Am I going to affect the safety and well-being of my children? Am I going to, like, forget livelihood? It was about life or death here. And then, the afterlife. It felt so scary. And I think that's the thing that I would say. It felt so scary.
Yeah. Jess, you want to jump in? I'd love to hear. I don't know. I'd love to hear about your like kind of construction to deconstruction transition. Where did it come from? Why did you listen to it? What were the feelings? Like, yeah,
I mean,
how did you get here?
feelings are so similar to Stace, and I haven't heard yours either, Phil. So I'm really curious too. And I'm very familiar with Stacy because um actually that's when we met. When Stacy, you had conversations with like Life, Love, and God, I think your blog. You remember that? I found her through that somehow, and I feel like one of the first places that felt safe to ask questions. So this feels like a really full circle moment that I wasn't even thinking about.
So cool.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. Um, but I mean, I grew up Catholic as you did, Stace, right? Um, and I don't know, there was like a purity in my connection with God as a child. Like I would go into church and I would remember, like I didn't love the priests and, the confession and like that stuff like freaked me out, but I did it because I had to in Sunday school and stuff. But I did like being in the church and looking at the lights, and I would just feel this connection that just felt good. I'd lay in my bed at night and I'd pray. I just talked to God in my head, and I felt safe and I felt good. And so I carried this with me to, teenage years, when one day I went with a friend to like what do they call it? Like a non-denominational Christian church. And it was very different from the Catholicism that I was raised in, whereas like, you kneel and you bow and you're in the pews and it's all like, the way that it was, is. And so this felt like a little like rogue, to be in this non-denominational Christian church. And my mom like always reminds me, when I first introduced my family, I like stood in front of the doors and I was like, prepare to be amazed. And they all came
Oh
in.
my gosh.
Like,
I love
oh, what are they like? They're all just being free in here. And then she was like overcome and loved it. And so like there was a strong connection from the
it.
start that just grew throughout my life. And so there was, yeah, just this always this like very spiritual impulse in me to recognize God within my heart. Not that I could really define it, but I felt something, like I felt something inside. And but you know, going into deconstruction, like Stacy said, like there could be so many hours talked about like really
Mm.
the nuances of so many things. But it kind of reminds me of like the Princess and the Pea, where like she keeps stacking the mattresses, but like she still feels that pea and she like can't not feel it. That's how hell was for me. This like
Mm.
big, hairy, ugly, gross thing that like would not settle my system. I had friends that were Jewish that like really loved God and were just beautiful people that, I mean, I was taught was going to burn in eternity, um, and that it was their choice. And that's not just like a friend of mine, that's many friends of mine. That's millions, hundreds of millions of people in the world. Like that was heavy to know that. Like it's like I didn't feel released to worship on Sunday mornings when that was going on in the background. That like, wow, don't we all know that like one of these days, like, all like this many of us are in heaven, like this many of us are going to be like burning eternally. Like it just would
Mm.
not go away. And so I talked to people about it a little bit, within my faith community, but it was very much like, well, you have to believe in hell. It's in the Bible, and like this is how it is. I remember an assistant pastor or a pastor that I was like assisting under. I brought him some of these questions. Like he was like the one I really opened up to about it. And he was like, how dare you? Who
Mm.
are to question God. If God wants to make 10 people and send 9 of them to hell and keep one of them in heaven, who are you to decide
Mm.
whether that's just or unjust? And I mean, I was very vulnerable. That like crippled me.
Can I have his address, please? I need to go have a word with him.
I was in college by that point. I was having Bible studies in my dorm room. Like, there was a leader of Bible study. I was like hosting things. I was very prominent in like our campus ministry and stuff. And so there was like a web that I was a part of in so many different ways, and it was deep and it was really ingrained. And these fears would just like come and they wouldn't leave, and I had no outlet for them. So I was in a lot of fear, just like terror, that like this is really the way that it is. Like I love people more than God, the creator of the universe, loves people. That was scary. And then, of course, it was like mine, because we're taught that God like is greater and like loves. And so it's like, well, then I can't love greater than God. So something must be wrong with me. Like maybe I have a twisted version of what love is. And, all these Bible verses would come up in my mind, like the heart is deceitful above all, and so maybe I'm just like my heart is deceiving me, and like this isn't really love, and I have blinders on, and like it was just a
Mm.
minefield, and it was scary. um and I think the fear got so intense for me that one day I just like Stacy, like I couldn't take it anymore. I couldn't take like the internal strife, and so I just remember I was outside and I prayed and I was like, God, I can't do this anymore. I don't believe in you in the way that Christianity tells me to, because like my heart says something different, and like as much as I want to like put Bible verses on top of that, like I still feel it in my heart. So like the truth is that I don't actually love you for apparently who you are. I'm afraid of you and I don't want to follow you out of fear. And so like I would rather just choose to go to hell and just be free to like believe what I believe in my heart about you, and then just be wrong than like just pretend my entire life, because I can't make this thing work. Like I can't make what's not working work, and I've really tried to put it
Mm.
together. It's not fitting for me. And so it was that became like a catalyst. That prayer like
Mm.
opened something up, and that's a
Yes.
whole nother.
I have to say, first of all, I love your story, and I know so much of your story, but I love that, and I didn't know that part. And one of the things that so many times people who who are really bothered by where we're now at in our faith and our spiritual journey. Gosh, how tired am I going to get of saying spiritual journey? I think I'm going to get really tired of that really soon. But like, I think that those people, and there's even people like on my Facebook today who were like sad for me and questioning me and challenging me and doing it in their own lovely ways and caring ways. And I get it because I was where they are. But they don't see like the sincerity, like the
Mm.
really like, I am trying, like I am like I'm fasting, I'm praying, I'm like really trying to understand. Like sometimes people are like, how could you be so casual about God? I'm like, casual. This looks
Mm.
casual. The torment that I've lived in, that you lived in, the willingness to have hell, to not just, and I wrote this part in my book, God Loves Me, I think, Stories from Hell, Heaven, and the Other Side of Texas, where I talk about, God is up on the empire, like my relationship with God, and how threatening it felt was this. God and I, in my imaginary conversation, are up on the top of the Empire State Building. And here is, God, and God says, "Do you love me, Stacy?" And I felt the same way that you did about God as a little kid. Like I would talk to God, I'd kiss the cross, I would kiss my Bible. I just was like the lights, the incense, that I was just like all felt mystical and magical, and like I was in my own little wowville, and it didn't get tormenting till later. So there was all this joy, but imagine God saying, "Do you love me, Stacy?" And me saying, I don't even know if I know what love is. I don't even know if I feel love for myself. I want to love you, but I don't even know if I know what that is. And all of a sudden that God turned, like the God of the Bible that I know just can turn, like I had this experience in my imagination, and that God took me and grabbed me by the back of my clothing, hung me out over the height of the Empire State Building off of the balcony we were standing on, and said, "Now let's try this again. Do you love me, Stacy?" And it's like, what are you going to say when your whole life and death is at
Mm.
risk? And the threat, like there's not an option for an answer. So here's all this talk about free will, and
Mm.
here's all this talk about God is telling us to love our enemies. But if we don't believe exactly the right way, God's not going to love us. We're going to be an enemy, but God's not going to love us, but he's going to tell us, like it was just so, there's not room for any answer other than yes. And that means that you don't have free will. That means you don't have choice. That means that it's not love. And that I had to go, either that's what God is, and God is some asshole God, or I've been taught the wrong idea about God. And I want to go on the journey of discovering who or what this thing we call God is. And I want it to be organic, and authentic. So anyway, that's it for me. When I hear you
Mm.
talking about that, I'm just,
Yeah.
yeah, people don't understand that it's not like, I want to hear your story, Phil, but I just wanted to finish that last point, is like people accuse us of being thoughtless, of being casual, of being
Mm.
cavalier, of
Right.
not caring. And it's like, no,
It's the opposite.
this consumed my whole, I care so
Right.
much. What
Right.
about you, Phil? What was it
Yeah.
for you?
Well, I'm really enjoying and feeling very encouraged because I looking back on it, and of course things look different when you're in the middle of it. Now it's been enough years that I could say I can like look back on it, but I would say this, like the same sincerity that drove me into Christianity eh, is like the same sincerity that I guess in a way like drove me in this new direction. Like it's the same. It's I was like so excited about my relationship with God, and like you guys, but in different ways. Like I was gonna spend my whole life telling others about God, and I did that for decades. And I'm so grateful because it really was sincere to me. Like I can look back and see that sincerity driving me to like do a good job with that and just think of it as the most important thing in the world. But I think people that haven't gone on a journey like this probably don't understand that it really is that same sincerity that led me to like I remember there was like a period of a few years where just questions were coming up to me, some of the same questions you brought, some other questions. Yeah, afterlife, heaven, hell, savior, the Bible. Like there's just some questions coming up, and man, I can tell you how tempted I was to just ignore it and leave it alone. And I really believe I could have done that. I don't know if that
What
makes me
kept
a
you
good.
from it?
I really believe I could have done that because this was my job and my income and my stability and my also my identity was so wrapped up in this. So I just believe I could have ignored it and lived the rest of my life. Um, I feel that like I don't know, I feel like there was an invitation. Where it came from, I would now say I believe is a good play. It came from a good place, but there was an invitation to go on a different kind of journey. And it's with sincerity that I was like, yeah, I'm not going to ignore these questions and doubts. I'm not going to pretend. Yeah, fuck that. I want to go on a sincere journey and see what I can learn about this whole thing and how we got here and what we're doing here. And yeah, and it's just it's just weird to think like, yeah, the same thing that drove me into Christianity essentially eventually it led me away from it.
So I
Um,
have this voice in my head of the people who are outside of your life. Okay, so
yeah,
people who are outside of your life are looking in and going, Phil, like in
yeah,
a tisk tisk kind of way, like
yeah. I
you're
know.
just sincerely wrong. Like the devil.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna play advocate,
Mm,
devil's advocate, angel's advocate, whatever it is.
yeah,
Phil, you're sincerely wrong. And the devil
yeah,
has gotten a foothold in your life. You must have done something that
yeah.
got the
Uh,
devil in there to confuse your mind and turn you away.
yeah. I've heard it all. I will say recently, one thing that I've come back to a few times, and you guys tell me if this resonates with your own journeys, but like when people are like, whatever, you've been led astray, or whatever, yeah, you've turned your back on God, or you're disobeying the Bible. I think for me, and this used to sound insane, but to me, it now makes more sense than anything is that ultimately I had a choice to make for my own life, my own journey. This is not something I'm trying to prescribe to anyone else, but I had to look inside and go, what will be my ultimate source of truth? Will it be what the tradition says? And like, oh, this is what our tradition, this is what we've been saying for thousands of years. Will it be what the Bible says, this book that's been written for thousands of years? Will it be what someone else thinks about me or someone else has to say about it? Or will it be something that is true inside of me? And I think ultimately I looked around at all the options and I was like, I gotta go with me. I just have to go with my own soul and I gotta trust that. And I know like there's people that have told me like that's like the dumbest thing in the world. You can't trust yourself. I'm just like it to me it's the only thing that makes sense now.
Mhm.
It's like,
No,
yeah, yeah,
I have to say too, like I've really thought about this and I'm like at the end of the day, that's what we're all doing. Like whether we're in the Christian camp in the in between or outside of it or some mixture, like we're all following what makes sense inside of us because any text can say, I am the ineffable word of God or I am true. Like you can write it on a sticky note and put it on a book and it doesn't make it true because the words that were written about it it's what it does inside of you, so like these people who are like I mean like the book of Muslim, I don't know that that's a book, I don't think it is, but the
Quran,
Muslim,
Quran.
yes, that could say within it that like this is the holy book that God created, and it's like then you would have to either just blindly, like, well, this says that I will follow it, or you feel an impulse inside of you that says yes, and you go towards that, or you feel an impulse that says no, like that's really what we're all doing at the end of the day. We're like trusting the Spirit, you know, which I know the Bible also talks about, that will discern for you, you know, right from wrong, yes from no. So like, I mean, the weight of, well, the you know, this is true because the Bible, it's like, how does that feel to you? Because any book can say the exact same thing, but there's something in people that are drawn to that. And I think that there are beautiful, wonderful truths in the Bible. It's not something that I've
Of course. Yeah.
thrown away, which a lot of people do going through this process, and I get it.
Mm,
And a lot of the reason why is because I think it's because it was so abusive and so um fear inducing, and since has become traumatic and triggering, you know, for people. So a lot of people like turn away from it because they're afraid, not because like they really don't believe anything in there. But
And
at the
it's
end of
conflicting. It's conflicting. There are things that in the Bible, and there are things that it's like, oh, well, you got to keep this, you got to keep this rule, Stacy. And it's like, yeah, but there's like 1,617 rules. And like, are we still wearing a covering on our head? Are we eating shrimp? You know what I mean? Like, there's so many things we're not doing that are in there, you know, and it's like it can become conflicting, and you stop. It reminds me of the movie The Firm. You know, did you ever see the movie The Firm with Tom Cruise, where he's a lawyer, he's a young lawyer in this very
yeah,
established
I
firm,
remember
but
it.
then he goes against the big firm. You know, he goes
Mm,
against the big firm, and he's going to take them on because they're doing this nefarious stuff, right? And so here he's the little guy, and he's not resourced and all this. And what they do is they bury him in papers, and but he keeps going through it. He keeps going through to find the things. He doesn't give up, even though he's buried in paper. Sometimes people, you know, get so buried in the conflicts that things that don't make sense in the Bible, that they just go, and like you said, Jess, they're being used against them. So it feels like this trauma book, or this, you know, this weapon that's been beaten, you know, over the head. They're beaten over the head with it, and they just go, "That's it. It's overwhelming. It's painful.
mm.
I'm not opening. I'm out on this." Right?
yeah.
It's tricky, yeah, when that God language gets thrown around. I mean, it gets weighty, and it gets, yeah, it's scary.
And I mean, I didn't through my journey, like I didn't come to, I didn't, I went through the deconstruction, but like I didn't have a desire necessarily for a little bit there, I guess, to reconstruct Christianity. It was more so reconstructing my faith of some sort, because that didn't
Mm,
go away. Like the thing that I felt when I was little, when I looked
mm,
at life, and
yeah.
I had that remained the same always. Like even when I was questioning, even when I was afraid, even when I was in conversation with people who, you know, were rejecting and, you know, shaming, like that impulse was still like I still felt it in me. And so it was really a reconstruction of faith. I did go through the like, you know, understanding the Bible in a new way, and, you know, kind of getting into like Christian universalism and stuff. And I'm in a different place than all of that right now, but like I still carry a lot of the biblical principles with me. I still like I actually feel closer to Jesus than ever in my life, because it
Mm,
feels Jesus without like the filters and the baggage and the toxicity and the trauma, and there's the purity really is back.
It's
mm.
so beautiful. Philip, you said something that made me wonder. You're like, what brought us into this? And I wonder, you know, all those times I remember going to Mariners Church and, you know, Newport Mesa, all the different churches. And then you know, I worked with an organization called Alpha. So I was like, all across the world doing things. And and it just, I remember so many times the pastor would, and and I as the worship leader would say, God, show us the truth. Show us the truth, because you know the truth leads to freedom. And you know, it was for Christ, it was for freedom that Christ set us free. I remember telling you that, Jess. I remember telling you, and I having that conversation with you on the phone one day, and I've talked to so many people about it, that verse of it was for freedom that Christ set us free. It's like there's it's just it's enough to be free. And so if the truth leads to freedom, and our prayer is, God, show me the truth, like isn't that maybe what led us here? You know, all those prayers prayed by all the pastors that we were under, the pastors that we were, you know,
How
like,
dare you? All I can say is how dare you?
oh, tell me more. Tell me more. How dare I
No,
what?
no, but I think for me, there was a time where I'm like wondering, what is this force or this pull or this flow that is pulling me on this thing? I remember it being such a beautiful moment when I finally, I guess, accepted that maybe this flow that's pulling me on this path is good and has my good in mind. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, because there was like maybe a time where it's the fear, it's the deconstruction. It's like, yeah, is the devil like leading me astray? Like, what's happened? How could this have happened? But I do remember like finally getting to a place where I'm like, oh my, oh, this is like a, whether you want to call it God or whatever, but this is goodness that's pulling me down this path. It's not
Mhm.
to kill me and to ruin me. This is like a path that's leading towards freedom and life and joy. And just how what a relief that was for me. Like, oh, okay, yeah, this isn't evil that's leading me down this path. It's goodness.
Mhm.
Oh man,
Mm.
so resonant. Like I remember, I mean, it was really my um just confronting my greatest fear, right? Like of going to hell. That once I said, fine, I'll take that if I can at least just follow this thing that keeps feeling like it's calling to me and it makes more sense to me and it feels good in my heart, you know, my bad, deceitful heart. But I would like I kept taking steps in those directions after I said that prayer. And like, you know, I would come in contact with the next step, right? That would speak to me and I would like it was yoga at the time, right? And I would freak out and I'd pray and pray and pray and pray and like, you know, God, like is this you? Is this you leading me? Because all of those verses were in my mind, you know, like the blind leading the blind and like the devil is like deceiving me and he's putting something over my eyes and like all of that was just
Mm.
all the time and every step that I would feel my heart leading me to, I had already like come to terms with, okay, I guess I'm going to hell, you know, if you so choose. But I also had a little hope that like, oh, maybe if I'm before you one day, I tried my best. Like, can I, you know, am I good? Am I okay? And I hope that that would be true. Now I don't believe any of that. But, you know, like
Mm.
I felt the same way. Like there was like just this thread of like goodness that I wasn't always sure if I could trust, but like I gave myself permission to just finally do that. And it wasn't easy. Like I was terrified all the time until I wasn't anymore. And I realized that I could actually trust that impulse.
Mm.
And it did
Yeah,
act greater and greater truths and freedom.
Mm.
yeah. Um, I I would love to capture. So we talked about like all the anxiety and fear of that first transition from construction to deconstruction. I would love to hear like what are the feelings because there's a part of like the deconstruction where yeah, you're not even thinking about reconstruction. You're not thinking about one day I'll put it all back together. You're just you're like seeing this thing crumble and you're like I don't know, it's just terrifying, but I'm curious what it's looked like for you and what some of the feelings have been as you have started to put something back together again. What does that look like for you? And yeah, like what did it feel like?
Hmm.
Jason, go first.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. What did it feel like putting it back together?
Yeah.
There was so not pressure to put it back together at a certain point. Um, you know, as I wrote about in my book, you know, when we came back from upstate New York, where we were living, when it kind of all unraveled and I unfolded, you know, it was like this thing that happened where I had peace with the not knowing, and I called it living in the land of not knowing. And, there's so much confidence, and then there can also be so much stress with thinking you know all the answers um, in your faith, that not knowing can be the thing that feels wrong. And then you're trying to get out of your not knowingness. You're trying to like go, let me get to the land of knowing. I need to get to the land
Mm.
of knowing. This is my big pursuit. I need to get to the promised land where I have the answer for why the person died of cancer and why the world is flat or round or this or that. And I mean, just there was such this pressure to know everything. And then when I came through what I call a tunnel, it was like a tunnel where there was only room for me and spirit, me and God. And when I came out on the other side, it was like, oh, I love not knowing. There's so much
Mm.
peace in not needing to know or else. There's so much, there's so much love I can have for people when I'm not spiritually anxious. It shifted the way I lived and the way I loved. And so the evidence came quickly in myself that this is a good thing. And between me and others is like, I don't need to save you. I could go to Christmas party. I was such a pain in the ass at my husband's Christmas party. It's like, who's there? Who's gay? Who's Jewish? Who needs to be saved and changed by me? Because that's what the church taught me. And then when I walked through that, I was like, I just love you. You're a better human being than I am. I just want to love you and admire you. I would find that people had to drink a lot around me because the crazy Christian was showing up trying to save them at every holiday meal. Like, that's no fun. I'm no fun to bring to a party. And now it
Mm.
was fun to go to a party because now I'm like, you just be you. I get to like you or not like you based on the merit of what your character is, not based on what this organization told me the kind of relationship I can have with you. And I found a lot of freedom.
Yeah, I really love that. I love the idea that in the reconstruction phase, that there's just not pressure to get it right, and there's not pressure to, like, sure, build back something that you want to build, create something beautiful, but not because you need to, or not because, yeah, like, I don't know, heaven and hell are riding on what you come up with next. It's just, there's like a different way of holding beliefs that seems kind of different in this phase.
Yeah, in the same way I didn't have to figure out my faith, I didn't have to figure you out either. Like, the
Yeah.
pressure was off for every relationship, well, except my marriage, because,
Mm.
I just save all the special nitty-gritty parts for my husband. But
Yeah.
yeah, I really felt like I understood what loving your neighbor was. And it wasn't because I went to a church meeting or on a certain day that told me I had to love my neighbor and invite them to my church and this and that. It was like, my neighbor was pregnant and she was a nurse and she already had a kiddo. Like, I can bring her a meal and no one needs to know about it in a story on the stage and the altar on Sunday morning that I did this thing. Like, it's just, I
Mm.
get to see what the needs are around me. I get to see people for what they are. I get to see spirituality for what it is. And I get to just be in real time with it instead of fear time with it. And that was a really huge change to my nervous system, to the way I lived, the way I loved. Yeah. I I loved not having to figure it all out.
Mm.
What about you, Jim?
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. Jess, any thoughts on what what that rebuilding or reorienting has looked like? What did it feel like?
Yeah, I know for me in the beginning, like I needed answers because,
Mm.
um, as far as like the concept of hell and like all the many things that I was dissatisfied with in my spirit, um, like the answer for that was like just trust God. God is, God's ways are higher than our ways, and so there was this level of like we don't need to know everything, we can just trust. And I couldn't be in that within Christianity. I couldn't be in that outside of Christianity. I needed
Mm,
certainty. And so I started with like books. I would just like devour books from people who have deconstructed or who have different ideas. I needed to find people like great who were still Christians, but they had different ideas
mm.
about Christianity than I was exposed to. So it's like I titrated my way up to freedom.
That's so cute.
And I would find big people that like Julie Ferwerda is a big one who wrote Raising Hell. And I was like, wow, this is a person who's still a Christian, but she has like a totally different understanding of
Mm,
hell, but she still considers herself a Christian. Okay, that feels safe. And I just did that again and again and again with book after book after book.
mm,
Eventually that just naturally started to like open my perspective some. But then, I had several significant traumas and losses, like devastating losses in my life that brought me right back in touch with like crippling fear and needing to find answers and
mm.
questions. And so for me, like the seeking always arose out of like intense dissatisfac dissatisfaction within my soul. So it was this, you know, impulse of wanting that connection that I knew was real, that I knew was still there. But it was also like this, I want to get away from how terrible I feel inside. And there has to be answers. Like there has to be answers for the
Mm.
terror that I'm experiencing life, that I've gone through. And I need to know who God is in all of this because I need to get out. Like I need to get out, with peace and sanity and freedom intact. And right now I'm just bound. Like I'm bound in religious fear still. I'm bound in fear. I'm bound in um all over my life, all through my life. And so that really was a catalyst for me to continue seeking and finding answers and making sense. And what's funny about it is that um, now I'm in a place where like I have enough answers actually really because of the very personal, like embodied experiences I've had. And just like somebody teaches you trust, right? Like you don't just trust somebody because they're somebody. Like over time, you learn to trust them because there's consistency in their actions. That's how I've seen God's hand in my life over so many years. I've seen consistency in the way divinity has shown up within me and in my world. And so I've just like I've kept following the breadcrumbs, and now I'm actually in a place where
Mm.
I don't need to know it all, like because I trust so deeply, I trust so much that there's freedom and there's peace, and I do actually like feel confident like in what I believe and in what I know, but it's all like loose. Like I'm happy to not know it
Yeah.
all. The freedom in that now that I had to go through the like really intense figuring out and knowing and all of that.
That's good. That's good. I relate to that so much because I think our like at least the like body mind part of us, I'll just speak for myself. Like when I was letting go of this one thing, it was almost like, okay, cool. What's the new thing we can clamp onto and hold just as tightly? What's the new, if someone were to ask me, well, what do I believe? What are my new things that I can grab onto and hold tightly? And through a journey that was similar but different than yours, yeah, you get to a, a part of the journey where you don't you really don't want to hold anything that tightly. Like you're not, that's not really what you're looking for. Is just to replace one set of beliefs with another just as tightly held. It's like a different, lighter way of holding beliefs all together. At least that's kind of what I've found. Yeah, and the willingness to be like, yeah, here's some things I'm thinking about. This kind of feels nice to me right now, but also I'm not sure and I don't know, which were things that were not part of the previous way of holding beliefs. but seem to be a part of this one or this phase.
Like replacement therapy is what it sounds like. You know, when someone is leaving alcohol and then they'll give up alcohol because it's the destructive thing, but then they grab onto like eating donuts, you know, and then they go, oh my gosh, I can only eat so many donuts. Now I'm the size of a barn. Now I'm going to switch to smoking, you know, and now, okay, wait, smoking's destructive, but not as destructive as alcohol. And, you know, so I'll switch to gum. You know, there's this idea of replacement therapy that I think that we can get into, you know, and it's sort of like the spot on our counter that it is blank. You know, we clear off all the papers on the counter, and then the minute somebody walks in, they put their keys there, and you're like, no, you know, it's like, because a vacuum wants to be filled. You know what I mean? When we create this vacuum, this space, it wants to be filled if it's used to being filled. And I think that, you know, there's so much I love about the Bible. I see it as a book of wisdom. And when I think of, there's a passage in Hebrews that talks about, you know, it's our labor to rest. And I talk about this a lot for the last 20 years, because it's a real heartbeat for me. Is like, resting is about trusting. And so I feel like it's our work to not work so hard. It's our work to let go. It's our work to take the death grip off of the steering wheel of our spiritual life. And you know, Jess, you said something earlier, and I want to jump back to it, even though it's going to seem like disjointed from what we were just talking about. I think it was you said, maybe it was either one of you or Phil. But there was something about, with my boys, raising them in a certain way without a certain theology. They were forming their ideas about things, and they're beautiful spiritual beings. I mean, they're just really delightful and delicious to be around. They're great humans, and they're very unfettered by the thing, and unburdened, just like I didn't want them to be burdened by the religious things. But I remember Caleb expressing something, and then that he had a belief about, and then Seth was expressing something about past lives, and like Seth was right about it, you know, and Caleb felt right about it. And I said, you know what, guys, they were in their teens. And I remember where we were sitting on the bed in there, and I just said, we are all living our best guess. Even if people say they know what they know that they know, I said, live with humility, because the reality is we're all just living our best guess. We're all trying to find our way. Some of us might feel more confident that we know more things. Some of us might be more studied. Some of us might have experiences. But the truth is that the reality is that we're all just living our best guess in this spiritual understanding, and to find the thing that inspires you, that helps you to live the best version of you. And if a better idea, a bigger truth comes along, then trade out for that and just keep being willing, you know? And so they were quiet, and I appreciated the thoughtfulness that they had, because what they did was they were able to both still hold on to their thoughts, their inspiring beliefs, but now they made room for each other to have their own beliefs too. And I feel like that's love. It's beautiful. It didn't create conflict for this one to have this belief, you know, like wars were not going to start. The world wasn't going to end. And if one had won the idea over the other, it's not like that would have been the greater truth. It's so they both had room to live in their inspired truth. And I want that for us. That's what I want for Common Ground too. And I want, you know, somebody said today on the Facebook post, are you, so you're against the, essentially, they didn't say this exactly, but you know, so you're saying you're leaving the church, but you know, you're creating a new church. And I'm like, I don't know what we're doing. I mean, in the sense of, I don't know that we're creating a new church or we're not. What I want to do is I want us to be able to be in community and be able to find each other and be able to have these conversations, because how many of us have, and those of you who are watching out there and listening, whether live or on the replay right now, how many of you have had those private questions and those staying up at night times, wrestling with the answers that you knew that didn't feel like there was alignment or truth in them, or trying to find new answers that you didn't have, and feeling really uncomfortable with not knowing, and you didn't have any place to go to ask those things or to have a thoughtful conversation about it. And that's what we want to be for you. So that's our heart, is that you can come and bring your questions and bring your contemplations and know that it's totally okay. And there's room for you to be right where you're at, while we are right where we're at. Because, and I'll say this too, as I wrap this up, in the church, my experience, there were so many great experiences, and I'm so grateful. And one of the prevailing ones that I didn't realize until I left the church was that agreement is required for acceptance, and agreement is required for you to be loved. And when I left and I didn't agree anymore with the things that my church family had ascribed to, and I had as well, when I thought differently and I shared that, I was cast out of the love. And I don't want that for people who are sincere and going through this journey of reevaluating the faith that they were brought into and seeing, what is it really for me? This is a place you can come to and be in that conversation.
It was just hearing that is making me reflect on where I am now. And I'm remembering, Eli, my oldest, was going to school for the first time, and it was a private Christian school that he was going to for kindergarten. And I was a little bit conflicted about it, but I thought, oh, it's kindergarten, like they're just going to be teaching, Jesus loves me, this I know. But he would come home sometimes and he would tell me things that he was taught that would, like, I would cringe inside, and one day he came home and he was like, Mom, you can't trust your heart. And I was like, oh,
Mm.
I've heard that before. And, I got past the PTSD of it in that moment. And I really was, though, just able to be like, wow, like that's so interesting. I was taught that growing up too. And, you're in a school that is Christian, so they all believe the same thing there. And and that's not something that you have to believe if it doesn't make sense for you. And so I wasn't even in a position to be like, that's not true. You can absolutely, this is the right thing to believe. That's not right. This is right. I was just able to be like, yeah, people who are Christian believe that. And I used to believe that too. And I don't believe that anymore. What do you believe? And it's like, of course you can, like, and we would just have these conversations a lot because he kept coming home and kept talking about things, and he'd come home and talk about hell and how his friends believe in hell, and how he feels conflicted about it, and I tell him what I believe and where I am with that and what makes sense to him and what feels good to him, because really where I've landed now is that you can tell the truth by the way that it feels. That's what it feels like in my body. Either now, like the information that I interact with in my world, um, the felt sense of that either tells me it's true, or maybe I'm not understanding it yet, or it's not true. And so, if something concerns me or scares me now, then that's the way that, like, I'll hold it. I'm like, does this feel like freedom? Or especially if it's like from a teacher right now that, like, I follow from a different path, and I'm like, I've latched onto that and what they say, and I've done that through the years of, like, now this person has the answers, and I don't do that very much anymore, but I do really resonate with certain people so much so that, like, if they say something that's like off, I'm like, oh, it can feel like that sense of
Mm.
crumbling again, and I'll be like, okay, so it's either what they're saying here is either like not the whole truth, or it is true, and I just I'm trying to look at it through the lens of fear, and so I don't understand it right now. But if I can always fall back on, like, the truth will feel like freedom, then, like, I never have to worry, because, like, it's always going to be good. Either, like, I just don't get it yet, it doesn't make sense to me, and, like, it will, or, like, I don't have to keep that with me because it feels heavy. So
That's so
Yeah.
beautiful and so peaceful. And again, that I can hear like the whole crowd behind me saying, but how could you even know? You can't trust that heart. And like it's such a Salem witch trial, unfortunately, kind of thing. I remember in 5th grade, we studied the Salem witch trial. And so when somebody chose to accuse a woman of being a witch, men too, but mostly women, when someone accused a woman of being a witch, what they would do is they would put her on a thing and put her in the water, this big long stick in the seat, and then put her in the water with stones on her, right, strapped to her. And if she drowned, she was innocent. It's like, oh, well, but if she rose to the surface, she was guilty. And then they would tie her to the stakes and burn her alive. And it's like, you end up dead either way in that. Like, there's no way to win in that Salem witch trial kind of philosophy. And I think that when people see people like us and we have peace, we're told that peace is deception. And that's really like, how do you argue that? It's just like, you can't. You just go and live in your peace. When people say, oh, no, that's not really love, you're confused. You're confused because you're deceived, and it's not peace and it's not love. And it's like, wait, if I weren't deceived, I'd feel anxious. Like, that's it's so confusing. And I feel like you don't end up alive when you're under those kinds of questions and scrutiny and judgments. And so the best thing that I know to do is just live like what you're doing, like what we're doing. Just live. So
Yeah. Well, I think as we're kind of turning the corner to winding down, we definitely just want to say, like, who knows where you are when you're listening to this, where you're at in that journey. But I think the three of us would want to say, man, we see you, and those feelings are there. Those are big feelings that you're dealing with. So um, that matters. You're seen, you're known. Even for me in this conversation, it's so nice to know, like, oh, I'm not the only person that's ever gone on this journey. There are many people, for whatever reason, it feels like in this time, that are walking down this path and going on this journey. So I don't want you to feel like you're alone in this. We're with you. There's days where it's the scariest thing in the world, but also hopefully you hear that as you walk through the process with your sincerity and trust, there's some really good and really beautiful things ahead too. The lightness and this freedom. There's a lot of good stuff there too. So, yeah, I just want to encourage you wherever you're at on that journey. It's not for the faint of heart. I mean, yeah, it's anything but a casual or flippant thing, It's a big thing, and yeah, if there's good things ahead for you, I guess.
yes,
So
and you're respected. We respect the seriousness of what this is for you. Hey, we want to let you know some things that we want to thank you for joining us tonight in our Common Ground podcast. We do this once a month. Next month, we're going to do it on the 20th, I believe, of February. And does that sound good to you, Mr. Phil?
yeah, I think that's right. Yeah.
So check your
All the more
calendar.
reason to check our newsletter, get on our newsletter, and check our
Yeah.
website.
Do that. Sign up on our newsletter by going to commonground.love. There's a space if you scroll down on that first page for you to sign up for our newsletter. And then also, we're doing something really fun, Phil, this Saturday night. We're doing our first private come to the table event where we have a small group of people, like 10 to 12 people who are coming for dinner, and we're going to have conversations. And we also will be having a yearly event. So if you're interested in being part of our come to the table or our live event, or you'd like to participate in some way, we need help on the tech team. There are great ways that you can, volunteer your time and be a support to Common Ground and what we're doing, we'd love for you to also fill out that contact form and let us know what you're interested in, and we'll add you to the list. And then also, there are two ways that you can give to Common Ground. There are two purposes right now. We've got kind of two missions. One is that to support the efforts of Common Ground and what we're doing with having these spiritual conversations with those who are deconstructing Christianity, and all of our events that we're doing and our podcasts. So we're raising funds for that. And we're also raising funds for the LA fires. We live right here, just a blink away, Phil and I, from where LA was burning. And we just sent a wonderful $2,500 out to different organizations for Hurricane Helene. And we're already collecting funds. People are being so generous to give towards people who are needing help with the fires. So if you are willing to give, you can go to commonground.love/donate. And we will send your donations to the people who are in need, because there are a lot of people without fire insurance, and they're living in between where they are right now in like mass destruction to trying to rebuild their lives. They need furniture and food and diapers and all these things. So we're there to help. So we're a small organization with a big heart, and your generosity helps us to pay that forward to other people. So thank you in advance. All right. Anything else we want to
Alrighty.
say? Are we good? Mr. Robbins, you want to jump on and show us your cute face? Thanks for running the back.
Please do.
Yeah. He's like, I'm in my pajamas. Oh, there you go. Hi there.
Oh, I totally, no pajamas. No, I'm just casual.
You look great.
Yeah. No, very interesting conversation. I like all the different perspectives, and that you can have the conversation is really cool for those who need it, because there are people who need that. They don't know where they can go.
Yeah. And if you need to feel understood, I've got a book out there called God Loves Me, I think, Stories from Hell, Heaven, and the Other Side of Texas. You can find on Amazon. The link is here, and Rock will put it in the Facebook link. So you guys, thanks for
All
joining us.
right.
We'll
See you next
month.
time.
Ciao, ciao.
Bye.
Take care, everyone.
Bye.